Hi everyone, today I have an exciting interview with Melissa Tondi, an AI operationalization leader, director of AI engineering at her company, and we will be covering her career, her recent work with operational of AI, and agentic engineer role. Melissa, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for hopping on. So first, I want to get into how did you get into software quality and quality engineering?
Um, I love this question because it really, I think, kind of speaks to um, pivots in folks' lives and especially mine. It takes me back a little while. I've been in my career about 30 years. So right out of college, as I think most of us maybe experience, I needed money. I had gotten my degree in education. I was looking for a job to be a teacher in the new state of Colorado that I'd moved to, and realized that there were a couple of gaps in my courses. So I needed to take some of those courses in order for me to be licensed in the state of Colorado to teach. So while I was doing that, though, because again, I was a broke recent college graduate, I needed to start working. So I happened upon a contract position as a project coordinator position, which just so happened to be one of the world's first electronic medical records, or EMR. And it was a joint project between Kaiser Permanente and IBM. And they had offered what was known at that time as user acceptance testing. And really, what resonated in my mind was that it was extra hours and weekend work in which I could make a little bit more money. So I raised my hand and volunteered for that position. That was a paid position. And I started kind of testing the newly developed solutions. And I loved it. I absolutely took to it. I really enjoyed kind of reconciling requirements and focusing on the user advocacy piece. So that 3 to 6 month kind of overtime position wound up becoming a more permanent position. And I, along with a few other folks, started one of the first quality assurance teams as part of that joint project. So that was really the first time that I started or even knew that testing was something to be done. And I think as a lot of us do, when we start in maybe non-technical roles and have a desire to become more technical, one of the best ways to do that is to start experimenting and talking with folks who are in the technical spaces in either the companies that we work with or projects that we work on. And that's exactly what I did. And quite honestly, for the last 30-ish years that I've been working, I have really only strayed from quality assurance, software testing, quality engineering, maybe a year during that entire time. And I took roles of as a product manager, and even more recently as my new role as director of AI engineering. I would say that even still very much has a testing software quality engineering component to it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people share that similar. It's like they went to college for one thing, and then they later like, okay, I need a job, and that's how they get into testing. And obviously it's worked out super great for you. And so you mentioned your recent pivot. You're the director of AI engineering at your company. Can you tell us more about that and how you really think that AI is, reshaping software quality and software testing as a whole?
Yeah. About 3 years ago or so, at a previous company, I had a great CTO who I'd worked with in the past who, while he and I were talking and he was newer in this CTO position, we met over beers a few times and kind of waxed philosophically a little bit on kind of where the role of software engineering was moving now that AI was kind of front of mind for a lot of leaders and a lot of companies. And one thing that we had talked about was kind of the shift and where AI might change the role of software engineers at that point. And it really became kind of a joint venture where the CTO had very deep technical experience and expertise, but knew that AI was going to be something that we wanted to get in front of. And so, as his role evolved in the company, he opened up a position where at that time it was for a technology enablement position, kind of head of technology enablement, which would be kind of looking at processes, tools, people, and with a deep expertise in test engineering, which is what I brought in. And so when I was hired, we realized that that role really was kind of morphing into a technology operations role with kind of three distinct practices, one being the quality engineering again, which I kind of had, that deep expertise in, and then this emerging AI operations practice, which at that time was a team of maybe a half of a person that kind of then matured into one full-time person, and then the delivery. So all of the things that really kind of make our software development life cycle tick, the people, processes, and tools that we used in order to do that. So I started really honing in on AI about 3 years ago as my position started maturing with this company. And then that really became, something that I felt deeply passionate about to start writing on, and then to start speaking on. And really, where it came about was I thought that there were a lot of decisions being made from leaders across the world and companies that were major companies that were making, in my opinion, knee-jerk reactions. They were, laying off large swaths of roles with the guise of AI is replacing these roles. And so I felt like there were a lot of decisions that were being made, and then that other kind of middle tier companies were taking their cues from these leaders of large corporations, and they were kind of doing the same thing without really thinking about, well, how do we operationalize a new disruptor like AI coming into the world? So the CTO and I were, as we were talking about this, now that I'm employed with him and working for him and with him, he really kind of took the technical portion of that, and I took the operational portion of that to say, you know what, instead of reinventing the wheel, which seems like what a lot of companies are doing, which is replacing people or present tools with AI and assuming that AI would then magically solve all of the company's problems, we needed to take a pause and look back at what some of the other disruptors in at least my career over the last 30 years or so before that had taken place. And so I thought about what some of the major disruptors that I had experienced in my career brought, and more importantly, were the lessons learned, so that we didn't continue to treat disruptors like AI and then the next disruptor that we will see over the next few years, whatever that might be. We didn't need to reinvent the wheel every single time. We could balance progress and innovation and being on not only the cutting edge, but bleeding edge, but also learn from the past and what worked and what didn't. And so to have a really solid operational model, we were able to really prevent what I think was imminent, which was a lot of layoffs, a lot of budgets being shifted from one department to another and all dumped into AI tooling. And so that really became a great partnership there. And then when I left that company for the last 6 months or so, I had really focused on doing some consulting with other companies around AI operationalization and applying that operational model that I'd helped build my previous company and helped apply either all of it or some of it with other companies, but really to kind of be that antidote to AI is going to change the world. Let's start moving quickly. Let's cut our budget by removing people and let's replace it with tools. As we know now, a lot of those companies are backing off of those previous decisions and maybe learning from those knee-jerk reaction mistakes, and they're hiring back a lot of those roles that they had previously, reduced or removed. And so really it became that antidote of there is another way to think about AI while still being innovative while still being cutting or bleeding edge. And there's a way to do that by also learning from the past. So my new role, again, kind of working with the CTO, is really that culmination of the last 3+ years of me thinking and kind of putting in place at a smaller scale an operationalized model, but then also then pivoting into the kind of an AI/agentic engineering director at my company. And really, what we balance here is that the AI or agentic engineer is a new way to look at traditional engineering roles, whether that's a quality engineer or a test engineer or a software engineer, or an architect or a DevOps engineer, whatever those engineering roles that typically make up a company's software development lifecycle or delivery teams make up. By kind of elevating and looking at how an agentic engineer can really be complementary to that. I think that really has allowed me a great and unique opportunity to be able to put all the lessons that I've learned in my career into what I believe the agentic engineer role is. And that's essentially what I've been doing for the last few months that I've been with this new company, is really kind of building that out and testing and exploring and experimenting, seeing what sticks and seeing what doesn't, and really kind of helping build and maintain this framework that exists now, and making sure that it has the ability to really ebb and flow with the needs of the business and the needs of the folks that are in there and using it at all times, and seeing how that evolves over time.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I love you bring up the point that, not just firing everyone and thinking, oh yeah, AI is going to magically just replace these people. And like you said, companies are bringing these people back. And so obviously you were on the cutting edge of AI 3 years ago. A lot of companies weren't doing anything. AI was something that can make a funny picture or write a college kid's essay, things like that. And so you talk about, applying AI at your company in this agentic AI engineering role. And so you've been applying this agentic framework at your company. And so what kind of results are you seeing?
This is was so eye-opening for me. Like I said, I've only been with this company for a few months, really, right around 3 months or so now. And what the purpose of, as I was kind of talking to the CTO who put this engineering framework in place back in, say, January, so maybe 6 or 7 months ago, is when the company shifted into kind of the framework, the agentic framework that is in place now. And with the goal and the outcome of that, anyone, and I kind of use anyone in quotes because, of course, it's not literally anyone, but most people in the company have the ability now um, to use the framework in ways where they can actually affect change, to where previously and especially depending on how close some of the business organizations and departments were to technology, but there was a department or organization that was a little bit further away from technology, where I mean, like, not as collaborative as say some other departments or organizations in the company, but previously, where they would have had to write a ticket, wait until somebody from the technology team picked it up, then waited for it to be prioritized or put on a roadmap. We would get a lot of those kind of lost requests back and deprioritized, right? They were always kind of prioritized lower if they weren't directly related to a roadmap that was, defined by a head of product or a head of technology or something like that, right? So kind of typical how work gets done by technologists. What this framework has done, and where we see the most success, is that because the framework is so well thought out, and again ebbs and flows and moves and is able to be structured to the point where it can support most people going in there with a non-technical background. There should be some technical background going in there, but really the framework exists so that folks can use plain natural language, and within the framework itself, see what is available to them and actually create solutions themselves, all by following the framework and the guidelines and the structure within it. So the successes that we're seeing is that the rate of, say, lead or cycle time, something that takes from the time it's incepted, I want to do something, until the time it is actually released and being consumed by users, we have significantly decreased that time. We've kind of democratized, I would say, the fact to where software engineers or the technology organization, although extremely and still very pivotal and very crucial to the success of the company, some of those boundaries that would have previously put some of these requests down in lower priority are now being able to be handled by the folks themselves that initially had those ideas and those requirements. And so that really has given, again, I say democratizing, but it really has leveled the playing field to where certain requests and things that are of low risk can really be handled by folks that previously where they would have had to wait for tickets to be approved and prioritized in the past. So that's probably our biggest success. And also, it's just really exposing folks already to AI. We're allowing people and giving them the freedom to explore and to experiment in a safe and boundary way within our framework itself.
Yeah, that's an incredible use case that instead of those, those lost support tickets, people can handle it themselves. And I'm sure these people being able to use AI is extremely empowering in their work, and they can do it in a safe way where they're not gonna, break a system or cause something to go down or things like that. And so bringing up that on that point, so obviously AI is constantly changing. Claude releases Fable 5, ChatGPT released 5.6. There's always changes. Everyone's competing. It's kind of an arms race to a sort, to a degree. So, how do you keep up with the changes to AI, whether it be new models, new features, etc.?
I don't even know if I do, because it is changing so fast, as you mentioned. What I've landed on today, it might change next week, we'll see. But I will say my company, the company that I work for, has a fabulous AI enablement head, and that person really kind of is the part of their responsibility is to kind of have time to where they are looking at what's coming up, how could this upcoming new release or new model or new company, how could that impact our existing framework right now? So because because they have dedicated time as part of their role responsibilities, I kind of took, and then, again, in other companies that I've consulted with, and even in my previous role at a past company, I think that there really just needs to be dedicated time. So what I do in my calendar right now is that I dedicate 2 hours a week at least, and I block my calendar, and that is uninterrupted focus time to where I go through of course, using prompts and even preferences or skills within my own Claude Code kind of instances. But I really do kind of focus that on new and emerging technology models that are coming out. So I subscribe to a few newsletters, and I subscribe to a lot of thought leaders. But really, for me, if I didn't dedicate the time and actually have it on my calendar, that was stuff that I knew that would slip it through the cracks if something else deprioritized. So that's how I currently personally stay up on the new things. Again, kind of having thought leaders where either you are from afar interacting with them, reading or watching their content, or if you happen to be fortunate, like I have a couple of thought leaders who have become friends, or certainly networking folks, looking at the thought leaders and what individuals are saying, looking at companies. Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, the kind of the forefront companies who are doing it, and then doing my own independent research and analysis. By balancing the three of those, I feel like I have at least a good way to see what's coming up that's going to affect me personally, what's going to come up to that affects the framework that we're working in at my company, and then what is coming up that might impact or might influence something that I personally write or speak about. I will tell you, I've probably have 15 topics right now that are in some form of of presentation mode in decks and outlines right now, simply because I've been able to fine tune and kind of hone in on balancing out those three components into my own personal keeping up with the latest of coming in.
Yeah, I love that idea of taking the time to block off your calendar and be like, this is my time to really figure out like what's going on because it is moving so ridiculously fast. And keeping up the thought leaders and the people that spend their whole days figuring out what's next is also a great idea. And so on this topic of learning more about AI and working with AI, and so what advice would you give to those wanting to integrate more AI and more agentic frameworks into their work?
Um, I will say, I mean, kind of full disclosure here. It is I spent the last 15 plus years of my career in some sort of a management leadership role where I didn't have a lot of opportunities, if any, depending on the role, to be hands-on, right? So I was, a quasi leader coach, but really rarely had the opportunity to get in there because of my job responsibilities. So over the last 3 months that I've been in this position, I am actively pushing into production and actively committing. And so and the reason I say that is because I came in it with just stale technical aptitude because of my previous roles before. This really speaks to the agentic framework that was in place when I started at this role, but me just really kind of diving in and saying, if I don't do it now and take advantage of working in the framework, asking it natural language and questions, and then figuring out the best way that I can work. I actually do a balance of kind of using terminal commands as well as using Claude Code, as well as using Claude Code chats and co-work. And I kind of wrap all three of those things. So we have a little bit of checks and balances on those, but it allowed me, who had, again, kind of stale technical aptitude coming into it, to use natural language and then to actually see it in those terminal commands that I was using and kind of refresh my memory from 15 years before that when I was doing a little bit more of that. So if you're in the position where maybe you are switching from a manager or leader and going into an individual contributor, I can very much say now in the last 3 months, I'm very much an individual contributor. And that is astounding to me that I can say that. And I looked back at the number of commits that I made last week, and it was something that was, like it kind of blew my mind that I was doing that, right? So say, dive into it. The natural language, and starting out with something like a chat and just asking it questions, and then kind of graduating into using more of the Claude Code CLI, and then terminal commands, and kind of looking through that just in and of itself will refresh your memory or will give you some primers on how to convert the natural language into more of those commands. So for me, using a combination of the three of those forums in which to do that really allowed me to take off. It took about 2 weeks for me to really kind of dig in until I was actively churning out commits and releases into production. So depending on where you are in your own AI journey, technical, non-technical, somewhere in between, I think just kind of getting started out with the chats and then saving those chats, organizing those chats so that they're easier to find, kind of understanding how your model of choice is working, has just done wonders for me. So I can now confidently say that I've become an individual contributor in less than 2 weeks' time after not being one for over 15 years.
Yeah, that's great. I love the dive in. I think that's great advice for anyone, technical or non-technical. So thank you so much for your time today, Melissa. This has been very insightful for me, and I'm sure for anyone listening. They learned a lot from this.
Thank you. I've enjoyed my time.